Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, before we start this incredible journey, and one that I have been putting off for years, and I'm finally getting around to it, before we get into Mass Effect and this whole universe, just got to do a little bit of housekeeping, because as you all know, I like to keep my house nice and clean. So first of all, make sure that you follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod to be up to date on any Mass Effect things that I do, any Mass Effect topics when I release new episodes and when I talk about the books and what I'm doing as I'm playing through Mass Effect, because I'll be documenting it all there. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe is absolutely wonderful if you haven't already, so you never miss an episode. But I do appreciate likes and comments and all forms of feedback. So if you get any sort of feedback or you just want to talk about how much you love Mass Effect, please write it down in the comments down below. Also, one extra thing before we move on. If you listen to this on Spotify, please do give me a follow. But also, if you haven't already, rate the podcast. Because just like YouTube, if you rate the podcast, the higher the rating, the more the pod gets advertised and showed to people. So if you could do that and all those things for me right at the beginning, I will be eternally grateful. So, as I mentioned, today's topic, we'll be talking about Mass Effect, specifically Mass Effect 1 for this review. I feel like before we get into it, I'm going to have to explain as to why it's taken me so long to get around to covering this series. And I'm going to do a bit of a story time. So when I started this podcast in 2022, I think it was, I know it's been a long time to me. This will be my third year, so it's getting along. I wouldn't be imagined that I'd still be here. But when I started the podcast back in 2022, I had planned out sort of topics that I want to cover, things that I want to do. And one of them at the top of the list was to cover Mass Effect. And I was all for it. I was excited because I love Mass Effect. I've been a fan for years. I thought it'd be easy for me to talk about. It's something I can talk about for an hour, really get into it. And as I looked into trying to cover it, I realized that I haven't really had the skills, or don't have the skills, should I say, or didn't have, shall we say, to properly do the game justice or do the series justice. I didn't know how the software worked at the time. My mic wasn't very good. My skills were lacking, again, because I was just started. So it got really, really intimidating to me. And then in the end, I was just like, look, I want to do this series that I love justice. And right now I can't do it. So instead, I decided that I was going to cover Halo. And the way I did with Halo is that I split it into two. So I covered the Bungie era of Halo, and then I did the 343 era of Halo. And that went really, really well. Then for my second year, I'm like, okay, it's my second year. I kind of know what I'm doing. Maybe I'll do Mass Effect now. And then I was like, you know what? I really like Bioshock. I really feel like playing Bioshock. And next thing I knew, I just went into a deep dive into Bioshock. But I did say, if I make it to my third year, if I do 3 years, well, this will be my third year, I will then cover Mass Effect. And you had Chat Tsunami, who recently got into Mass Effect, and he really, really loved it. And then we were talking in the Podpack Collective chat, and it got me hyped. And I thought, you know what, if I don't do it now, who knows how long it will be until I keep pushing it off. And I like to do big game breakdowns in the summer. It's kind of become my thing, as well as covering the game showcases with Xbox, Jeff Keighley's show, and Ubisoft and the like. I like to cover games during the summer. One Pacific game series I like to cover. Like I said, I did Halo, I did Bioshock last year. This year's Mass Effect. Who knows what I'm going to cover next year? But I figured if I don't do it now, how many years is it going to be till I keep pushing it off? So that's why it's taken me so long to cover this series. I feel like I'm finally to the point now where I can talk about it and do it justice. So that's why we're here today. Before we move on to I start getting into it more, sort of the nitty gritty, if you haven't already, this is part two of a series. I already began a month or two ago when I covered the book Mass Effect Revelation, which is the prequel novel to the first Mass Effect game. So if you're interested in seeing where the story actually begins with Mass Effect, check out that book review. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's everywhere you can find my podcast. It's called Mass Effect Revelation book review. Check that out first. Just in case you're jumping on board here, I don't want you to start halfway through. And also, it's a great book, and like I said, it's a great introduction to this world and the characters and this universe. So, good place to start there. So, for this series, I wanted to do something different. As I've said, I'm a huge fan, hardcore fan of Mass Effect. I've played Mass Effect multiple times. I've played through it loads. I've read all the books. I've read the comics or graphic novels. I own a copy of the short film, which is like a prequel sequel to Mass Effect 2 and a prequel to Mass Effect 3. I own that. I've got statues. I have a bust of Morden Zolas. I have a miniature statue of the SS V Normandy. SR2 model after the events of Mass Effect 2, when it was rebuilt by Cerberus and then retrofitted by the Alliance in Mass Effect 3. I have a model of that. I have a necklace which has on the end of it is a pendant of a mass relay. I've got loads of things. My room is covered in Mass Effect stuff. And I wanted to do something different for this series. I didn't just want to just rehash what I've already done in terms of Mass Effect. So one thing I wanted to do to keep it fresh for me, but also give it a new, fresh perspective for you guys listening, and it make it a bit new and more interesting for you all, is that for the first time ever, I've decided that I'm going to play as Femme Shep. I know I've never played as female Shepherd. I always play as the male Shepherd. I do it with every RPG. I always try to role play myself. And obviously, me being a male, I always sort of try to design my character on me, or a version of me that I'd like to be. And I've never played female Shepherd. And I've been told for years by so many people that Femme Shep is way better than male Shepherd. And I wanted to experience that. So I thought it's a new, fresh experience for me going through these games again. And it's a new, fresh experience for you all of hearing my thoughts and feelings on, does the game feel different? Does the tone of the game feel different because it's a different voice actor? It's a female voice instead of a male voice. And I can already say now, it's a lot more calmer. It feels a lot more sort of organic and relaxed, but I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, so I'm playing as Femme Shep for this playthrough. Her name's Jessica Shepherd. I've already created her. If you follow me on Twitter, I've actually posted sort of a photo of her already, as well as all of her stats. So if you're interested, go on there. You can have a look at what she looks like. But that's how I decided to keep it different for this series. Now I want to sort of tell you a bit of a story of how I found out about Mass Effect and how I first played it. I can't remember how old I was. This game came out about 2007, so it was possibly about 2007, 2008. I remember, this is years ago. I remember when Blockbuster was still around, and I used to love to go to Blockbuster because they used to sell pre-owned games, and they used to do pretty good deals on pre-owned games. And I remember I went with my family to Blockbuster, and I had a bit of pocket money left over, and I was just going through the games, and I remember seeing this one game, Mass Effect, and it just pulled me in because on the front cover you had these aliens, you had these different creatures, you had Shepard on the front, you had Mass Effect, and on the back you had all the different you had little windows of combat, and this incredible story about humans are now traversing the galaxy, but these ancient race called the Reapers threaten everything, and you have to hunt down this alien called Saren, and it just absolutely drew me in and fascinated me. I still think that I was potentially a bit too young for Mass Effect when I first experienced it, mainly for the fact of I was too young in terms of experience with RPGs, because how big and vast this world was. I feel like when I first started to play it, I was overwhelmed, which I was. And it wasn't through a few more playthroughs of the first game while I was waiting for Mass Effect 2 to come out that I really started to get to grips with it a lot better. But that being said, my first sort of experience it was just my first experience is my same experience I still have now at 26 years old. Is every time I play Mass Effect, every time I first see the Citadel, time I see the Normandy, or I see the crew, or I go to any of the planets like Ferris, um, or I see any of the creatures, or just anything about Mass Effect. It's so spectacular, it's so grand, it's so epic that I am gobsmacked each time. And even though I've played through this series multiple times, like I have had to have completed Mass Effect in the hundreds. I do it every year. It's like a pilgrimage with BioShock. It's just a series I have to replay every year. And I just remember being blown away and not being able to believe that a game like this exists. And it was actually the beginning of my love of BioShock. I remember, I think the first sort of BioShock game I played was Mass Effect. Absolutely loved and enjoyed. It blew me away. Then I remember I love fantasy as well because I like Lord of the Rings. So I remember I saw that they had brought out a game called Dragon Age. So I played that. Absolutely love and adore Dragon Age. Maybe that's what I'll cover next year, Dragon Age. But absolutely in awe of everything that they do. And it basically, I became a BioWare fan ever since. And I have been. I even bought Anthem. I pre-ordered Anthem because I was sold on the idea what Anthem was. And BioWare never let me down. And well, I still think it was a good game and it should have been kept alive and it should have been supported a lot longer. But it wasn't. Again, it was a failure. But even so, I still enjoyed Anthem for what it was. And I still don't think BioWare I still like, but BioWare's no longer the team it was. The people that made Mass Effect and Dragon Age and all that, they're no longer there. It's a new team making the new Dragon Age and who will be making the new Mass Effect. That being said, I still have faith in BioWare. They still make fantastic RPGs. And it all began here with Mass Effect, of my love for them as a studio and as a creative powerhouse. So like I said, I'm actually a huge fan of the series. And it's absolutely wonderful to be given the chance to talk about it here today. So I'm really excited about that. So let's get into the development. So Mass Effect was developed by BioWare and directed by Casey Hudson, who previously directed BioWare's 2003 title Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I've actually never played the Old Republic games, so I still feel really bad. One day I'll go back and play them. Reproduction of the game began in early 2004, shortly after the Microsoft Windows version of Knights of the Republic was released. As the development team was already experienced with the Xbox console, they decided to develop the game originally for its successor, the Xbox 360, due to its improved processing power and development tools. A total of 130 people were involved in the development of the game, and the first 6 to 8 months were spent conceiving how the game would look. Mass Effect uses the Unreal Engine 3 as a groundwork, but on top of that, the team developed additional components for advanced digital actors, space exploration, and squad combat, resulting in BioWare's largest programming project at the time. During the game's 3 to 4 year development cycle, most of the time had been devoted to the development of these technologies. Because BioWare wanted to create a memorable story, Mass Effect was envisioned as the first chapter of a trilogy from the very beginning, and having a considerable technological basis would help soften the development cycle of its future sequels. Instead of designing a role-playing game where the player would control a blank protagonist, the developers wanted players to assume the role of a central character that would have to make important decisions. According to Hudson, this approach would allow them to create a unique level of intensity and cinematic power, while at the same time give the player the same role-playing customization as previous BioWare games. Choices and consequences were a high priority as developers did not want players to follow a predetermined path. Due to the game's numerous dialogue options, the dialogue wheel was created to help players identify which responses belong to certain emotions. The use of digital actors allowed developers to create conversations where characters would speak by using facial expressions and body movement. Hudson explained that they wanted to evolve the pseudo-turn based combat of Knights of the Republic into a real-time third-person shooter interface. The combat was meant to offer the tactics and customization of a role-playing game, but through a similar and more intuitive user interface. It was also designed so that players would not need to press many buttons to pull off the squad's different attack combinations. The team worked closely with Microsoft on several elements of the interface to make sure the combat was tactical enough, and went through a lot of trial and error to balance the combat between role-playing game and shooter. Creating a great sense of discovery was a major goal. Developers wanted the game to feature an actual galaxy that could be explored beyond the core story locations. A very large team manually built several parts of the galaxy, and they were able to expand the playable space significantly by using internally developed tools. Classic space exploration games such as Starfight and Star Control were cited as major inspiration. These encouraged the team to create the M35 Mako. Oh, bloody hell, so many stories I can tell about the Mako. For exploring the game's uncharted worlds and develop game mechanics to survey planets from space. Star Control 2 would also be an inspiration for their writing and character design. Drew Karpyshyn, who I previously talked about, who wrote the book Mass Effect Revelation, who previously served as a senior writer for Knights of the Republic, was the lead writer for Mass Effect. Despite the fact that each of the game's planets had one primary writer, all of the writers involved in the production had to review each other's work and offer criticism. This process of collaborative feedback and individual effort is common at BioWare, and it is behooved Karpyshyn to make sure the style was consistent across all different areas. One of the biggest challenges the writers faced was the amount of volume they were required to write to support the game's multiple dialogue paths and story outcomes. It took them 3 years to get everything into the game, which featured about 400,000 words and more than 20,000 lines of spoken dialogue. According to Karpyshyn, this is roughly the equivalent of 20 movies or 4 to 5 full novels. Films such as Star Wars, Alien, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Blade Runner, Starship Troopers, and especially Final Fantasy The Spirits Within were major influences on the atmosphere and artistic qualities of the game. The team chose Jack Wall, who also penned the music for BioWare's 2005 title Jade Empire, still haven't played that either, as the main composer of Mass Effect due to his ability to produce a wide range of musical styles. Hudson had a clear idea of what kind of music he wanted in the game, but gave Wall certain artistic freedom to express himself. According to Wall, the main vision was to marry the electronic instrument palette of the late 70s, early 80s with more organic elements. Wall had never written this style of music before, but composer Sam Hulick helped him develop the electronic sound on a classic orchestral foundation. By the end of the project, composers Richard Jacques and David Cates joined Wall and Hulick to finish the score on time, while a total of 110 minutes of music were written for the game. All in-game and cinematic music was crafted as multiple stems to maximize their use and virality. The game went gold on October the 22nd, 2007. So a lot went into the development of the first game. But I absolutely love and adore this series. It means so much to me. I've already started my adventure with Fem Shep. I usually do this whenever I do any sort of review, apart from movie reviews, is that I like to get started so that it kind of gives me an impression of what I'm going to look forward to, and I can kind of relay that in the introduction. Obviously, I've played Mass Effect multiple times, so this part usually wouldn't be needed, but because I'm playing as Fem Shep, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of mention it early, sort of my early experiences with her. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot more calmer. I find that when I play as male Shep, he's a lot more, even when I'm being sort of a Paragon, I always play as a Paragon. I never play Renegade. I just can't be a Renegade. It's not in my nature to be cruel or to be mean. And I've tried doing the Renegade run. We've all done it. I was saying to Chat Tsunami, because when he first played, he was talking about how the Emily Wong was really getting on his nerves. She's the reporter, and you get given the option in all 3 games to lay her out, to deck her, to punch her, wherever you want to call it. And I said to Chatsu, and everybody agreed. I felt crazy saying it, but it was nice to know everybody agreed. I basically said it's a rite of passage. Everybody decks the reporter when we first play. I don't know why. It's just something every Mass Effect player does. And at first it was funny when I was younger, but playing through it now, I just don't have it in me to punch her. And it sounds wrong, I know, but if you play the game, it makes sense. And it's the same with any sort of decision in the game. I've done Renegade, or I've tried to do a Renegade playthrough, and I just don't get very far because it's not in me. But whenever I play as male shepherd, even when I'm playing as a paragon, when I'm being nice and kind, he just has a voice that is too gruff and too gravelly to really convey the idea of being a paragon at times. Whereas Femshep, she's very calm, and she's only really shouty or mean when she needs to be. When obviously I've only got to the part where the council is delegating about Seren, and I had to find the evidence against him before I could become a Spectre. And where I just left her, she had just been given the Normandy off Anderson, and she's very calm. She's very collected. She only, like I said, she only needs to shout when she needs to, and it's strange because I'm so used to, like I said, even when I'm just being normal, just normal conversation with Mal Shepherd, he's very sort of gruff and sort of rough spoken. So it's strange having somebody who's so calm, who's very sort of like, that's what you'd imagine Shepherd to be like, really, when you first meet them. The idea that they're very calm, very relaxed, very collected, very sort of like, it's okay, I'm here, I'll save the day. What's the problem? How can I help? Sort of thing. And I've got nothing against Mal Shepherd. Of course I don't. I play as Mal Shepherd all the time. It's just strange having such a calm and collected voice when you've got all this noise of all these different races and all this huge universe, and then you've got the Geth, and then you've got the Reapers, and you've got this whole idea that the universe is potentially under siege or will be under siege eventually. That you just have this calm voice in the midst of all that noise. It's very soothing. So far my experience with her and her interactions is that she's very calming, and I like that. I don't know how it will be as I get to know a lot more characters and how I sort of start romancing. I've already decided that I'm going to romance Garrus. I know Marie from Two Girls, One Reusable Cup won't be happy about that because she's claimed Garrus for hers, which is fair enough. I don't blame her. Garrus, he's a handsome devil. But I feel like I'm going to go with Garrus for two reasons. One, he's my best buddy, and I love Garrus, and I'd happily spend the rest of my life with him. And I feel like my female shepherd would be happy with Garrus. Also, number two, I'm playing on the Legendary Edition. And the problem is with the Legendary Edition, and I found this through my first playthrough when I played for the Legendary Edition for the first time, is that I always romance either Liara, Miranda, or Tali. It's usually Liara or Tali, to be honest. It's only if I'm really feeling really fruity that I sort of romance Miranda. But it's always the Asari or the Quarium. But I decided for my last playthrough to romance Liara. Problem is that there's a bug. So basically, you meet Liara in the first game, and then in the second game, you meet her again, and that there's this Shadow Broker DLC, and you get to kind of team up with Liara again, and then you get to rekindle your relationship, which I did. I did all that. It was lovely, and then we get to Mass Effect 3, and we meet each other again. She becomes part of the crew, and I rekindle that relationship. And basically, there's a glitch where you can't get the achievement for romancing the same character for all three games, because it doesn't work with Liara. And it doesn't work with Ashley or Caden because, again, you don't see them a lot. So you only have a few characters that you can actually romance all the way through each individual game, and it counts. So I've decided that I'm going to romance Garrus for this run so I can get the achievement. But also, I just feel like I just want to romance my best friend. Don't judge me, okay? We all love Garrus. We are a Garrus loving fan here on the Nerdstalgic podcast, okay? And I know Marie ain't gonna be happy about it because it's her man, but I'm gonna borrow him for this playthrough. I do apologize, Marie. I know you're listening. But yeah, my experience so far is that I absolutely adore, and I'm her voice, and I'm really excited to learn more about female shepherd. Also, like I said, I'm going to play as a paragon. So I'm going to be very kind. I'm going to be very sort of the angel of the universe. That's how the paragon run is. I'm going to romance Garrus. I'm probably going to get rid of Ashley when you get given the chance to sacrifice either Ashley or Caden. I haven't decided yet, but I'm leaning on the side of Ashley, mostly the fact of I just prefer Caden over Ashley. I usually used to save Ashley all the time because I used to romance her. But as I've gone on, as the years gone on, as I've grown up, and as my playthroughs have changed, I always find myself now, these last few playthroughs as the years have gone on, sort of sacrificing Ashley and keeping Caden. I just prefer Caden. I get on with him a lot more, and I prefer the conversation with him, and I feel like he's a lot more interesting character. But again, that's my opinion. Other Mass Effect players might disagree. So that's my decision so far. I'm going to try my best to save Rex when the option comes up, because again, I can't go through Mass Effect 2 or 3, him not being there. But again, like I said, I'm a veteran, so I know what I'm doing. I haven't got nothing to worry about. I'm just excited to begin this journey, really, to see where it takes me. Even though this is the universe that I've been in multiple times, because I'm going in with fresh eyes as a reviewer, as somebody who's going to review this series completely, as well as going in with fresh eyes with a new character, with a new perspective. Because I've already noticed how people react to female shepherd over a male shepherd. There's one moment that I've experienced, and it was a bit disgusting, really, because I've never experienced it before. It was all new dialogue. Basically, there's a moment where you see the council for the first time in the Citadel. They basically say, you've got no evidence against Seren, leave Seren alone, all this jazz. And then Udina and Anderson are like, there's a guy in CSEC, I think his name was Hackett, that you've got to go talk to. He's in Chorus Den. Go talk to him, and you'll be able to find that he might know who'll be able to help you find evidence on Seren. So I went there, and I've had many, like I said, I spoke to him many times before, but I've never had this experience with him. As soon as I spoke to him, he basically mistook me, because I was a woman. He mistook me as one of the ladies, one of the patrons of the club, and he was very disgusting to me. He said, "Oh, come sit down on my lap, and if all the soldiers in the army looked like you, I wouldn't have joined CSEC, I wouldn't have joined the Alliance." And I felt violated. I really did. I felt disgusted. I really wanted to punch him in the mouth. Sadly, that wasn't an option, and I just told him he was disgusting. I got the information out of him, but he was a pig. But it's that experience. I was like, bloody hell! I was not expecting that at all. Because again, I've always played as a male shepherd. I've never experienced it. So playing it with this experience it excites me more, because I'm excited to see how other characters, how they look at me for being a woman, how that's going to change the way they talk to me or how they interact with me. So it's those interactions that I'm most looking forward to now, and I wanted to bring that up here because I just find it so interesting that they took the time to change how potentially how characters interact with you for being a different gender. I know they did it with Dragon Age, especially Dragon Age Inquisition, that if you played as a Quarry, or if you played as an elf or as a dwarf, certain characters would be prejudiced against you, or certain characters would not like you, or other characters will like you, but some characters not. So it's quite interesting that it's here in Mass Effect, just from the different genders. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But I've been talking for 28 minutes now. I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to go off and play more Mass Effect. I'm just really, really excited. Generally, this is one of my biggest loves is Mass Effect. It really is. And I just feel so glad that I finally got around to talking about it. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to play some Mass Effect, and you're going to hear my thoughts and feelings on this series right now.
Hey everyone, this is Satsunami from the Chatsunami podcast, and you're listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. Without any further ado, let's get back to the episode.
So I've just finished playing Mass Effect on the Legendary Edition. And honestly, my first impressions after, to be honest, this is kind of obvious. My first impressions after playing the game again for the 20th millionth time. I love it. I absolutely adore Mass Effect 1. And the reason why I like Mass Effect 1 so much, and I alluded to this pretty much in the introduction, but I'll rehash it here now quickly, is the fact of what it does to set up this world is incredible. As I've mentioned, this was the game that got me into BioWare. And then from here, I went on to play Dragon Age and play all their other games that have come since. And apart from Anthem, which even though I don't class it as a letdown, it was still a bit of a bummer. But they haven't really completely let me down. I even like Andromeda. I'm one of those rare few people that really enjoys Andromeda, and trust me, we will cover that and we'll talk about it later on in the year. But what this game does in setting up this world and these characters, and that Mass Effect feels epic. The universe feels huge. That's something that Star Wars is missing. And yes, I'm going to bring Star Wars up. One of my biggest caveats to modern Star Wars is the fact of, the whole point of Star Wars, it's meant to be a galaxy. It's meant to be huge. It's meant to be a universe. But what they're doing with Star Wars, and I'm not talking about the animated stuff, I'm talking about live action stuff, is that unless you read the books or you watch like the Clone Wars or Rebels or anything like that, the universe feels really small. It feels really truncated. It feels very sort of linear. And it shouldn't do, because it's a universe. It's a galaxy. It should feel huge. And that's one of the issues that Star Wars having. With Mass Effect, you never have that in any of the games, especially in the first one. They went all out, bringing in tons of new races. You had Asari, you had Solarian, Krogan, Turian, Rachni, Geth. I think I've mentioned Quarian. You have the Hanhar, you have the Elcor. Eventually, we meet the Drell. We meet trying to think what the other one is. Brutarians, the Volus. You get a lot of expansion as the games go on, as the series went on. The expansion, the world got bigger, because we were only really in the sort of Attican traverse, really. We were only in one section of the Milky Way galaxy in this game. When we get to Mass Effect 2, they open up the terminus systems, which is where all the lawlessness, where Omega is, and where all the bandits and factions like the Blue Suns and something like that, the mercenary groups, where they are. And then when you get to Mass Effect 3, you have the whole galaxy. You have all the different sectors, and you've got all the different planets, and you've got a lot more races. And I just love it because it's ever expanding, it's ever growing. And so going back to it, and it just feels like putting an old coat, a nice pair of worn trainers that you're putting on. It just feels great, and that is my overall sort of love and experience of going into Mass Effect for the 20th billionth time. It just feels right. It feels huge. It feels expansive. It's a world. Take out the Reapers and take out all of that side. Obviously, I wouldn't want to live in that universe. But if you put that to one side, Mass Effect is a universe that I would want to live in, that I'd want to experience it. I'd want to travel this galaxy. I'd want to travel this ever-expanding universe. And one of the sort of realistic points of Mass Effect, and not Mass Effect, but like the universe in general, sorry, and let me clarify for that, is the fact of, as we know in our universe, in the real world, the universe is ever expanding, it's ever growing, it's kind of infinite in its expanse, right? So there's a potentiality out there that a race like the Krogans exists. There's a race like the Turians exist, like the Asari. Again, at the same extent, there's a potentiality that the race like the Reapers exist, and the Geth, and you could even go as far as outside Mass Effect. You can go like the Yaucha, the Predators, they could exist, or the aliens from Alien, they could exist, and the xenomorphs and things like that. Like the terrifying part of space, that could exist as well. But it's still that fact of, I'd love to live in this universe and be with these characters, and that is just something that BioWare always did really well, in my opinion, is just building a world that you'd want to live and stay in. And it's the same with Dragon Age. I'd love to spend time in Dragon Age. I'd love to go through their cities and things like that. And it's funny that I mentioned Dragon Age, because as I was playing through this one, I was talking to Dan about this and Chatsunami, that I found it funny and interesting that as I was playing through this run, I kept thinking to myself, because this game, even I'm playing on a legendary sort of edition, and this game has been sort of remastered and retooled, especially the first game, to look a lot better, to play a lot better, to be a lot more sort of user friendly. Because Mass Effect 1 on the Xbox, it wasn't user friendly. It was just difficult, and I'll get into why as I break down more things. But it wasn't easy to get into, and for a lot of people, they struggled at the beginning. And even though that I'm playing Legendary Edition and things are different and that they've made it a bit more easier, it still feels like classic BioWare, the way they used to make games before. Obviously, they went on a more big budget and had a lot more money and could expand and do a lot more things. And it reminded me of Dragon Age. It reminded me of going through for Elden and that world. And I was sitting there thinking, I really want to play Dragon Age. And I've got all the Dragon Age books. I've mentioned that a couple of times before, and I've never read them. So maybe after I've done Mass Effect, if anybody's interested, I might go through the Dragon Age games. I still have to play the DLC for Dragon Age 1 and 2, which I've never done that. So that'd be a nice experience. And it'd be nice to read the books and to review them for you, Beans. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. But it was just, I found it interesting that was the experience that I was getting as I was playing, of like, oh, I kind of want to play Dragon Age. So I found that interesting. But my experience as playing as FemShep, my overall sort of experiences, I absolutely loved it. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound like heresy, but I feel like so far, currently, I feel like FemShep is more superior to male Shep. And the reason being is the fact of, and I was thinking about it when I was talking to certain characters, because I knew how certain characters were going to sort of take me, how certain characters were going to answer me back in terms of how many times I've played through certain scenarios. But I only knew that in terms of male shepherd, and I knew how male shepherd would answer and how what he was going to say, because it was just ingrained in my mind of like, I know what he's going to say or how what he sounds like. But then when I went in with FemShep and how she spoke and how the voice actress, how she spoke in those sort of times, and sometimes the dialogue would be completely different. The tone would be different. The dialogue would be different. The dialogue would actually sometimes fit a lot more than male shepherd. And like I said in the introduction, she was a lot more calmer. She was angry when she needed to be angry. She was assertive when she needs to be assertive, but she was caring and understandable when she needed to be caring and understandable. With male shepherd, it just feels like you go from 1 to 100 very quickly. Very much of like, I care about everything, but the world's at stake. Very much where sort of FemShep, she's a lot more sort of relaxed and calm, and I like that. I like that calmness in, like I said, in the noise of this universe, of this huge destruction power that's coming. You need somebody who's going to be level-headed and a lot more sort of calmer, down-to-earth sort of thing. And I really enjoyed that. So I would say that from my experience, that FemShep is a lot more superior. And actually, one thing I want to mention here quickly before I move on is that when I announced that I was going to do a run as female shepherd, Chat Tsunami, who's only ever played Mass Effect, he's only played for that series once, and he played through as a male. After I said that I was going to play as a female, he basically said, "Right, that's it, time for regeneration," and he's now going through Mass Effect as a female shepherd, which I really like. That I think that's really interesting. Because I know he wants to do his own sort of Mass Effect month as well, which I think he's planning on coming later in the year. I don't know when. But I'd like to see his experience and what he thought as a female shepherd is like. So that's going to be fun to have a chat with him about that when he has finished his playthrough. But anyway, so my sort of thinking for this sort of review is going to be a bit different. So I'm going to break it down, talking about the story as per planet. And then once I do the story as per planet, then I'll talk about the other sort of things that I like and about the game, because I just feel like it'd be easier if I break it down per planet. Then it's a lot more digestible. If I just go through Eden Prime, the Citadel, Feros, Novaria, Vermar, Islus, and then the ending, it's a lot more streamlined, and I can talk about things specifically instead of going, I like this, I like that, you know. So the first planet you go to is Eden Prime, where you find the beacon. You are with Nihilus, and you first get to make your character, and you get on the Normandy, and you get to Eden Prime, and you find that there's this big creature. You don't know what it is. This big ship's come down with the Geth, and your first sort of introduction to the Geth. And from here, it's kind of very much of the style of this. It sets the scene very quickly of like something big is going on in this universe. And then you meet the Geth, and then you learn more about synthetics and AI, and you learn more about who the Spectres and about Seren, because you get introduced to him here. And I like Eden Prime. I do. As a sort of beginning of the story, Eden Prime is a good place, because Eden Prime is a frontier world. That's kind of the whole point of Eden Prime, is the fact of it is a planet on the edge of the Terminus system. It's basically proof that the Alliance and that humanity can have other sort of colonies, have other planets that can thrive, and that we can defend them, and that we can look after them, you know, that we are sort of capable of doing this. Because obviously at this stage in the story, the other races, they see us as children. They see us as kind of like, we don't deserve to be here. that we were here on a fluke, we're here by accident, that we don't belong here, that we need to prove ourselves worthy to be here, to be on the council, have a spectre. And obviously all lays down to the events of Shepherd, and eventually we get to become a sort of a spectre from there. Then once we are done on Eden Prime, we've touched the beacon, we've had the vision, we're seeing things, all psychedelic, and then we ended up going to the Citadel. And one thing I loved, I made a joke in my notes about Citadel, where I basically put the notes in brackets. People are still lost here to this day, and the reason I mentioned that is the fact of, as I sort of referenced earlier, one thing with the original Mass Effect is that it was user friendly if you knew how BioWare's RPGs were, and if you knew and played RPG games. If you didn't, you got lost, especially in the Citadel. My friend who had never played Mass Effect before, he loved it, loved the introduction. Then as soon as he got to the Citadel, he hated it because the signposting was terrible. He got lost. He didn't know where he had to go. He didn't know what to do. And the reason being is because a lot of the places where you've got to go are in the journal. You've got to go into the journal, and the journal will say, and sometimes it can be quite vague. It can be like, go here to see this person. And like, if you don't know where here is, you don't know where to go, basically. They've kind of cleaned that up and made that a lot more easier with the Legendary Edition. But for a lot of people, they just got lost and gave up. And like I said, I know a few people who did. And it's a shame, really, because if it was a lot easier to traverse around the Citadel, I think a lot more people would have gone on and played Mass Effect and actually enjoyed it. But yeah, going through the Citadel, it is a lot more easier to go through now, but it was a lot of trial and error when I first played it. You worked your way around, you learned the map, you learned how it worked, and now I know where to go instantly. I don't even have to think about it. I just know where Chorus Den is, where Flux is, where the medical wards is, where the CSEC is, where the Citadel Tower is. And to be honest, I don't even have to walk there. I don't have to walk there because I know I can just use the Citadel fast travel, and I can go to these places easier. But yeah, I always joke that people get lost in the Citadel because people do, because it's huge. But when you first go to Citadel, it just shows how grand and how huge it is. That this is not even a station, like it's a city. That you got all the different races living here in sort of kind of not in harmony, but kind of just like working together to kind of betterment of the universe, better of the Milky Way galaxy, really. You have the council, and you learn about all the other races, and you meet like Volus for the first time. You meet the Hanar, you meet the Elcor. You meet all these different races. You learn more about them. You learn more about the Asari. One thing I love about Mass Effect as well is the Codex. The Codex is fantastic. One side, you have primary information, you have secondary information. All the primary information is all audio. So once you go on it, it would say like the Hanar or X, Y, and Z, and it will go read through it for you. So you don't even have to read if you don't want to. And I love that. And I spent most of my time when I first started playing Mass Effect just listen to the codexes, because like I said, I'm fascinated in alien races. I'm fascinated in cultures and in tribes and things like that. Even in the real world, about human tribes and human cultures and human history, all that stuff fascinates me. So to know that I could learn more about an alien race and how they evolved and their beliefs and non-beliefs and things like that absolutely fascinated me. So going through the codex is absolutely wonderful, and just hearing about the stuff. And then when you get to the secondary information, all of that is all text-based. It's not read out to you, but if you want to read through it, I do recommend it, because you do get a lot more insights into why certain races act the way they do, why sort of corporations, how they were funded, what they do, why they do, blah, blah. It's all very fascinating, all very interesting, all in depth, really. It's all this extra much of information that it's there if you want it, but it's not important. It's more just like if you want to learn more, that's where you go, but you don't have to. And I just like how they added that feature in. So it's absolutely wonderful. But you're going through the Citadel, you meet Tali, you meet Garrus, you meet Rex. I love Rex. I love Garrus. I love Tali. Like I said, I always seem to romance Tali or Liara, to be honest. And you can't blame me. I just have a thing for space ladies. But this is also where you become a Spectre for the first time, and you have to kind of help. You can either help Garrus take down Serum by getting the evidence, or you can go through the Shadow Broker if you want. It's up to you. You have choice of basically where you go. I always help Garrus, because again, you get to meet Garrus straight away, and then you can meet Rex, and then you can get Tali, and you can do it all in one swoop. Otherwise, you tend to go from Shadow Broker to Tali, then to Garrus, then to Rex as you leave. And it just feels a bit disjointed for me. But so I always go that route. But you can go the Shadow Broker route if you like. And there's loads of other side missions you get to do there. But once you take down Sarah and once you get the proof, you get a chance to become a Spectre. And then from there, sort of the universe opens up from this point on, really. Kind of, I like to think of Eden Prime and the Citadel as kind of like the tutorial level and the exposition. You have the tutorial level where you learn a few things, how the game works and things like that on Eden Prime. Then you go to the Citadel and you learn more about this expansive exposition about the world. You learn more about Sarah and you learn more about all the races and about the universe and how this place works and what the Citadel is and the technology and all that stuff. You learn all the exposition here. Then basically by the time you've done the tutorial, by the time you've had the exposition, you are ready and prepared enough to then go off to these other planets. And then you have the option to go to Ferros or Noveria. I always recommend for first-time players to go to Ferros first. Oh, actually, well, tell a lie. I always recommend people to go get Tali first because you have an option between Tali's aura. You can either or you go to Ferros or Noveria. Always get Tali first. A huge reason for that is not just because Tali, she's incredible and she's a love interest of mine, but the reason being is because Tali is a Prothean expert, and you are going to need her for those extra juicy bits of information when you go to places like Ferros and you meet the Thorin and things like that. It's if you want the extras, if you want sort of the background sort of stuff, it's great to have her there. So I always say go get Tali. Then once you get Tali, I mean, it's not Tali, sorry, Liara. I've been saying Tali this whole time. I just realized once you go get Liara, then you can then go to Ferros and then get all that extra sort of information. But Tali's important as well because then she's a sort of quarry and she has a lot of experience with the Geth. So she'll give you those background information stuff as well. Then go to Ferros. But Ferros is my favourite place to go in this game. Reason being is that I'm fascinated with the Protheans. And I love their architecture. Obviously, their architecture changed as the games went on because I feel like in the first games, BioWare wasn't sure about how they wanted the Protheans to look. So their architecture was very different. Whereas when you get to like Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, the architecture changes a lot. Because you can go to planets in this game and you can find pyramids that belong to the Protheans. Obviously, as Mass Effect 2 and 3 go on, we find that the Protheans, we don't find any pyramids in their architecture or what's left of their architecture after like sort of the Reapers come in and destroy it all. But it's one of those where I just love going there. I love seeing these dilapidated skyscrapers, really, and there are bullet holes and marks everywhere, which at first that makes no sense when you first go there. But if you played Mass Effect before, you know where those bullet marks are for. You know why there are rounds in the wall, why the big chunks like destroyed and things like that. Because obviously this would have been the last stand for the Protheans, fighting up and down these stairs in these towers against Reaper forces, and they would have had like bullet fire and things like that and damage. So all that absolutely fascinates me, really, really does. Also makes me wonder with Ferris as well when you meet the Thorin that why the Reapers never took the Thorin. I always pronounce, I don't never pronounce it right. Thorin. Basically, the big plant creature that you meet here. I always wondered why the Reapers never harvest that. If it was that good at keeping itself secret, then maybe that's why. But I've always wondered why the Reapers never took it. That's never explained and it's never brought up. It doesn't really matter, really. But it always made me wonder as to why it was never sort of taken and harvested, really. But it's my favourite place to go because it's just gorgeous, really. And then we learn more about Exogeny and about the corporations and how bad they are and the things they're doing with Cerberus, which I'll get onto that later. But it's my favourite place to go. It's a lot of fun. Then you go to Noveria. I don't really like it here, mainly because I don't like politics and I hate the cold. And Noveria, it kind of reminds me of the Citadel, because when I first played, like I said, in Mass Effect, I got confused around the Citadel. I eventually learned my way around, but I got confused. Noveria is the same sort of place. It's not really well signposted. It's a lot better now in the Legendary Edition, but originally it was a nightmare to get around, and it was just a ball ache and just took forever. I don't like Noveria. The beginning part of Noveria, anyway. Then once you manage to find your way around it and you do the little political sort of espionage and that sort of stuff. You finally get a garage key, and you can kind of get in the Mako and make your way to Peak 15. Which when things start getting interesting and you learn more about the Rachni, you learn more about the Rachni war with the Krogans, about how dangerous they are, and what the sort of why that led to then sort of the Krogan rebellions and the Genophage and stuff like that. I always recommend with Novaria to take with you Liara, because you get to matriarch Benezia, which is her mother. I mean, you have a good little bit of dialogue there. So I always recommend taking Liara because she gets to meet her mother. And then take Rex as well, or Garrus. Both are fantastic, but take Rex because he will give you extra sort of details about the Rachni and the Rachni Queen and stuff like that. So that part is always quite fascinating. Also, I decide to save the Rachni Queen. I always do. I always have done, to be honest. Mainly because I always like the idea that people can redeem themselves, and that the whole idea of the Rachni, which I always find the Rachni quite fascinating, because they exist on a different sort of level of existence, really. They have corporal forms, they have sort of solid manifestations like we do, carbon based, but their communication and the way they fought is on another level. It's kind of like a song, really. And that the queens teach the young when they are born of how to be and how to act. And if you have a queen that is evil or malicious or corrupt, then the children will grow up to be the same. But if you have a queen that is just, that is right, that is harmless, is basically friendly, lack of better words, then the young will grow up to be the same. And from having this chat with the queen, I basically realized it was the best decision to keep her alive. And it works out for the best when you get to Mass Effect 3, when you get to meet her again. And it's probably one of the best decisions. To be honest, honestly, it seems like a small decision, really, but when you get to Mass Effect 3, it's actually a huge decision, and it's a big thing when you want war, because the whole point of Mass Effect, well, you don't realize it's to Mass Effect 3, but you are basically trying to recruit allies and people to help you so that you have more for the war effort at the very, very end. But again, that isn't sort of obvious until you get to the last game, obviously. But yeah, save the Rachni Queen. I know it doesn't sound like, well, I don't think you can go for Paragon or Renegade, it's up to you, but I always say the Rachni Queen because it's always the best decision, trust me. And I will explain why when we get to Mass Effect 3, but it is the best decision. So then once you've done Ferros and once you've done Novaria, then you have Vermeer. I quite like Vermeer. Vermeer is a beautiful, lush place, but this is where sort of Seren has his main base, where we first get to meet Sovereign. We have a chat with Sovereign, when we learn more about the Reapers and what they do and what they stand for. Again, Reapers are very scary, but very fascinating, to be honest, especially when you get to the DLC that expands the Leviathan DLC, which expands their lore and their story in Mass Effect 3. They're absolutely incredible. But a very important story point of this is that you have the option to save Rex or not. And it's quite difficult because unless you put a lot of points into your charm and able to kind of get the Paragon sayings, it's really hard at this point to save Rex. And majority of the time, if you haven't put a lot of points into charm, well, then maybe intimidation as well. I've never done intimidation on Rex at that point. I always feel like if I do the intimidation, I might get him killed. But it's kind of hard to save him. But I would recommend saving him, not just because he's a fantastic character, because also he's very important in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. And of course, it's Rex. We don't want to kill him. He's our giant space dinosaur, and we love him. But Vermeer, I love. Now, once we've done that, then we get to go to Ilos after we have to go back to the Citadel, and we have to kind of convince the Council to go after Seren. Again, the things with the Council in this game, and I'll talk about this in a minute when I talk about the ending, is the fact of the Council are difficult because they do not listen. They don't listen at all. And no matter how much we have evidence, how much we prove to them, they are very much of like on the side of caution. And even though they're like, oh, we believe you, Shepard, we want to believe you, blah, blah, blah. We've given you the Spectre status and, you've proven yourself multiple times. You still kind of get treated like a baby. It's the best way to explain it. If you're a Star Wars fan, there's Star Wars again. If you're a Star Wars fan, the best way to explain it is the fact of when Anakin is not allowed to become a member of the Council, even though he's proven himself multiple times that he's worthy to join the Council. They just keep saying no. And that's basically what it is with this, is the fact of Shepard will go, give you mountains and mountains of proof that the Reapers exist, the Collectors exist, blah, blah, blah. But each time they are very much the fact of, no, well, that's your word. I don't believe you. You say it. You saw it. I didn't see it. I wasn't there, so I don't believe you. And it's annoying, but again, as I'll talk about in a minute, well, I'll talk about it in a second. But anyway, after you manage to do that, you have the choice of then talking to Captain Anderson, and he can either break into CSEC and kind of get the locks taken off the ship, or you can go to Ordina's office, knock Ordina out, and then you can kind of go on his computer. Well, Anderson goes on computer and gets you free. I always do for the pit with Udina because I know Anderson wants to punch Udina, and to be honest, I don't like Udina, and for good reasons, which I can't talk about here because again, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. But I don't like Udina, and no one should like Udina. He's a politician through and through, and he's an asshole. And I mean, that's me being polite. There's many other things I could say about him, but I'm going to be polite. But when we get to go to Ilos, and I love it here. Same reason I like it in Feros. It's gorgeous. It is decayed, but it is lovely. You could tell that this Prothean city was once beautiful, and the architecture is wonderful. Everything is just lovely and sad at the same time. And it's a shame we don't get to spend a lot of time here, really. We get to meet Visual. We get to meet this VI, virtual intelligence, that is like a Prothean intelligence. And you learn more about the archive and about the conduit and about what the Master Relay really is and why it matters to the story. And all of that exposition, it's one of those that I never skip it. I always sit and listen, even though I've listened to it many times. It's just so well spoken, so well done, that it's just fascinating to listen to Vigil about, and as he talks about the Protheans and what they went through and how long the Protheans fought the Reapers. They fought the Reapers for centuries. Like they were like, because what you learn later on is that the Protheans basically shut off their colonies one by one. So the Reapers had to go colony by colony by colony, but the Protheans basically dominated the whole of the Milky Way galaxy. So you can imagine it took centuries for them to go, but on each planet they were fighting to the end on each planet. And it just shows how advanced the Protheans were, that they could fight the Reapers for centuries, basically. And it's all this exposition that really sort of brings you into the story, brings you into this world, and just sucks you in further. And you can get lost in the Mass Effect universe. It's really easy to. And I have many times, like I said, I read the books, I read the comics. It's something that you can get lost in, and you just want to get lost in because the world building is so perfect here, that you can't have not just get lost in it all. And I just love Ilos because it's beautifully sad, best way to put it, really. And then especially how it leads up to this epic finale where you find the conduit, and you find your way to the Citadel, and you stop Sovereign, you stop Seren. I mean, if you've gotten to this point, if you had a chat with him in Novaria, you have the option to kind of change his mind. Basically, if you have Paragon or Renegade, you have an opportunity to persuade him that what he's doing is wrong, and that by time, if you've done it right, and if you've done it in Novaria, by the time you meet him at the end, you can persuade him what he's done is wrong, and then he will make it easy for you, and he'll sort of have a moment of clarity, realize he's too far gone, and he will sort of end himself. And then allowing you to open up the Citadel sort of arms, and that's the Alliance and all the other sort of races can come in and take on Sovereign. This is a very important part as well in the story, where you get the option to save the Destiny Ascension, which has all of the Citadel Council on board. You can either refuse to save them and then take all sort of force on Sovereign, or you can save the Destiny Ascension, save the Council, and then take on Sovereign. And this does have effects. We learn in Mass Effect 2 that the Alliance lost half of its fleet, stopping Sovereign, and the sort of the Council survived. But the upside to that is, even though we lost a lot of our men, a lot of our ships, we were favored a lot more, not just by the council, by all the other races, showing that we are grown up, that we are capable, that we're not selfish, and that we do care about others apart from ourselves, and that we are seen better in a more positive light in the universe, which is very important as the story goes on. Or you have the option of sacrificing the council, and a new council is elected. And then again, you are seen differently in the universe, that humanity is out for themselves, that they don't care about anybody else, that we don't deserve the seat, we don't deserve to be specters and all that jazz. But there is a very big point to keeping the council alive. And to be honest, the long and short of it is the fact of, even though they don't listen, and even though that how many times you tell them, and they still kind of go on the back foot, by the time that Mass Effect 3 happens, and by the time they generally actually, you could say it's too late, but by the time they get to the final game and they see that the Reapers are real, that all this time you've been telling the truth, you want people that have have enough time with you to realize that you were always right, and that will follow you no matter what. You want that, because again, when it comes to Mass Effect 3, you want people that are willing to listen to you and agree with you and put all their resources into you as a person. Whereas if you decide to sacrifice the council and a new council is elected, that by the time you get to Mass Effect 3, even though they see the Reapers, they are more reluctant to give you services and to help you. They're more up for like, well, I want to help, but my planet is currently being bombarded by Reapers, so I can't give you all my resources, but I can give you some of them. And that's why it's important to keep the council alive, because it's the best decision, because by the time you get to Mass Effect 3, people are more willing to help you. All the races are more willing to help you. All of the council members are willing to help you, and it's just the better option, really. But yeah, so that is the end. You beat Sovereign. You elect a new member of the council, so the council will then decide who's going to be the new human representative. You can choose Udina or Anderson. The best choice is Captain Anderson. Udina is a prick. Never choose Udina, to be honest. He's the worst decision, and trust me, when we get there, I will explain why. If you played the Mass Effect games, you know why. But I always choose Captain Anderson, because he's the best choice, to be honest. He's kind of like I like to think of him of kind of like Winston Churchill. He was a leader that we needed during the war, for what was to come. And it's the same with Captain Anderson. Captain Anderson's the same. He's a soldier. He knows the stakes. He's more willing to listen and to follow Shepard. So he is somebody that you want on your side. And he's the perfect person to lead humanity on the council and council's best interest, moving forwards, really, humanity's best interests. So that's my sort of recommendation. But that is kind of the story, really. It's a lot longer than that. There's a lot more to it, a lot more nuance, but that's kind of breaking it down to the sort of bare essentials. Now I'm going to start talking about other things in the game that I really, really liked and enjoyed. First of all, exploration. One thing that I feel like Mass Effect 2 and 3 really is missing was the exploration. Like, you can land on a few planets, especially Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is my favorite of all time, and it is for most people as well, because it is basically, it took everything that was made the first game great and kind of just it did it better tenfold, as well as adding new things, new features, and Mass Effect 2 is the best Mass Effect game. But what I like about Mass Effect 1 is the exploration, driving around in the Mako. Now, I'll admit, in Mass Effect 1, the Mako was undrivable. That thing was a nightmare to drive. It was good armor, but it was just a nightmare against anything like a Thresher Maul, or you get shot all the time, and the shields will go down quickly. It was just a nightmare to use and control. But at the same stage, it was so much fun. It was so much fun using the Mako. But I love the exploration of going to the different planets, of seeing these other planets, of what was going on in them as well. And again, it's one of those sort of details that BioWare didn't need to do it. BioWare didn't need to make all these extra planets you can go to. They could have just stuck with the planets from the main game and that's it. But they didn't. They made these small few planets that you can go to and visit and have side quests and stories on there as well. And this is the thing I was also thinking about when I was thinking about the exploration. This is something that Starfield, Bethesda, was missing out on. I played Starfield, and I liked it. I enjoyed it. I completed it. But one thing that I feel like Starfield was missing was the fact if you could go to every single planet you could land on and go to, right? Apart from sort of gas giants, you could pretty much land on every single planet, which is good until you go to every single planet and you realize most of these planets are just empty, that there's nothing to them really. It's all procedural generated. And I feel like what sort of Starfield should have done was take out a leaf of BioWare. What BioWare did here was that the fact of you can't go to every planet, but you can go to some planets. And that way you can tailor these planets a lot more sort of specifically to certain stories or certain side quests. And you can tailor what they look like, and you put a lot more effort into how they play, how they function. You can have hazards. You could have sort of, you can't stand outside for too long because it's really, really cold. So you have to make sure that, you if you leave the Mako, that you run to safety as soon as possible. Things like this would have been really good. And that's what I like about Mass Effect 1 is the exploration of like, look, you can go to these planets, you can get in the Mako, you can run around, you can go to the moon. Going down to go on the moon and go around, and you get to see how the gravity is different on different planets as well. I would find this all very fascinating. One of my favorite planets, and one of the things that they do as well, is that every planet has basically a description. And one of my favorite planets is, I can't pronounce the name, so I'm just going to call it Zakarux, because I can't pronounce it. But this is one of the things that I love about the exploration is like, you can't land on this planet, but you can read its biome about it. And some of the planets is like, gas giant, it's a good place for helium free, or this is where planets come to dump their ESO after a long trip, that sort of thing. But some of them have interesting bios. Zakarus, for example, is one of my favorites. So Zakarus, a nitrogen-argon atmosphere, is being blasted away by the solar wind of the blue giant Grimson. Its surface consists of seas of loose silica dust some kilometers deep, which periodically swell into global sandstorms. Many unmanned probes to Zakarus have been lost over the years, though through investigation has attributed all the mechanical failures or computeral errors to a popular extranet meme insists that the entire planet is composed of dormant nanotechnology created millennia ago by a race even more advanced than the Protheans. According to the story, Zakaruk's silica dust is actually dissembler robots which periodically awaken to defend themselves. Though discounted by every reputable scientist, this theory has been popularized by a series of sensationalistic text by Asari author Desnay Orchestra. The reason why that's important is the fact of, even though, again, you can kind of go and say, according to this, actually dissembler robots, but people just dispute that, you kind of believe it to be true. And the reason is the fact of, if you know what the Reapers are, if you know that the Reapers are machines, right? The idea that a race more advanced than the Protheans, in a way to protect themselves and to protect their planet, they put spores into their atmosphere for machines, so that any machines that come through will be dissembled. And if you think, if this race was more advanced than the Protheans, what could that they do? Like, how good are these micro sort of machines, or whatever you want to call them, that could dissemble technology, that could break it apart like it was covered in acid? And I love that idea that this race was just like, this is the only way we're going to defend ourselves, is that we're going to put this into our atmosphere. So anytime the Reaper ships came through, they would disassemble and destroy these machines. Now, who's to say if it worked or not? Maybe it did work. Maybe it worked so well that the Reapers was like, well, we can't land on the planet, but we can nuke it from orbit. Who knows? Or maybe it worked so well that the Reapers was like, no, we can't go, so they never bothered, and that race is just stuck there, but nobody can go down to see them because no technology can get through, and they can't get no technology out because anytime they try to fly anything through their atmosphere, it gets destroyed. Who knows? But it leaves it up to think about what potentially is going on this planet, and it expands the universe. And some of the planets have bios like this, some of them don't. Some of them talk about other sort of races that came before the Protheans. Sometimes they were given names as well, and then you find other planets that used to have Prothean ruins on them. And it seems like this way it just expands this world where, if you know the story of Mass Effect, you know what it means that these ruins and why they were destroyed. But if you don't know, if you're playing the game for the first time, you're experiencing this of like, well, why are these ruins here? Why are they destroyed? What about these other races? Why have these other people haven't gone into these planets? Oh, that's why they can't go into these planets, because there's these dissembler robots that can't, disassembling bits of technology, so we can't get through. Things like that fascinate me, and they carried it on with Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, and it just makes exploration a lot more fun and a lot more expansion, because you're like, well, you know what, I'm going to take my time of exploring these planets. I'm going to spend my time of looking at every single planet, surveying them, see what I can find from them, see what benefits me. And for that, I absolutely love and adore it for that. Also, like I said, there are many different races as well. Learning more about the Asari, about the Taurians, about the Geth and the Quarians and their relationship, and about why the Taurians and the Solarians banded together to take on the Krogans during the Krogan rebellions after the Rachni War. And then the Hanar and the Drell and how they talk and how they communicate. The Volus and that how they have to wear pressurized suits because they live on a high pressured planet. And that if their suit was to rupture, they would just die. And it's things like that which are extra bits of information that, for somebody like me, is what you want in a story. If you're going to do a story like this, you want that expansion. You want to feel like this universe is freaking huge, and it is huge. So learning about all different races, I love. Then you have like side missions, like there's a side mission where you can track down Cerberus, and you can find out all the things that they're doing, and it kind of sets up who the organization is, what the organization is about, and it gets you prepared for Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, especially Mass Effect 2 when you actually work for Cerberus as well. What I love about that, if you've done these side quests, Shepard will actually mention to the Elusive Man and to Miranda of like, look, I remember Cerberus. I dealt with them. They were doing this on this planet. They were trying to make super soldiers and things like that. You were trying to do experiments with the Thrawn from Ferrus and stuff like that. And it's just fascinating that, and one that it expands and it sort of carries on in the next story, but also that you could play for this game, not know anything about Cerberus, and then realize when you play Mass Effect 2, or you can go through the series, do these side quests. You don't have to do any of these side quests; they're not important, really. Well, some of them are, some of them aren't. But overall, it's mostly just kind of to expand the lore and the story, and to kind of get XP so you can level up. But to learn more about them, I love that. That fascinates me. Then we get to sort of play around with the DLC. Originally for Mass Effect 1, there was 2 DLCs. But sadly, I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's licenses or they just couldn't do it or the file was corrupted. But they could only bring 1 DLC to Mass Effect Legendary Edition for the first Mass Effect game, which is a shame. But I think the other Mass Effect DLC for the first game, I think that was just an arena sort of shooter. I can't remember what it was called now. Pinnacle Station, that was it. And it was sort of like Spectres to go for training. That was the story behind it. Sadly, that's not there. It's still available on the original Xbox. If you have like Xbox 360 and you've got a copy of it, I think it's still on the store. But if you listen to this after July, it will no longer be there. So buy it as soon as possible if you want to give it a go. But we did get Bringing Down the Skies, which is really fascinating because, one, it's our first introduction to the Batarians. We get to learn who the Batarians are and why they hate humanity so much. We also get to go to an asteroid, and we get to shut the asteroid down to stop it from, I think it was on a attraction course with Terra Nova, which is another one of the human colonies. And it's things like this of like, if you didn't play the DLC, there's a small story sort of side note. I think it was a news broadcast that you walk past that I think they mentioned the fact of, if you don't play the DLC, that the asteroid crashed into Terra Nova, and that they were never able to recover, and that the colony is lost. And again, it's one of those extra bits of detail that I love. And that if you do manage to save it, it thrives, it prospers, and it grows, and then you can actually go back there in Mass Effect 3 and actually get resources and things like that from there. But the Bringing Down the Stars DLC, I do like it. It's short. I kind of wish it was a bit longer. You spend most of the time going around on the Mako on this little asteroid, kind of like Armageddon, really, on this asteroid, going around trying to stop the sort of thrusters from thrusting the asteroid into the planet, and that managed to get the asteroid turned around and away from the planet. Because what they're basically, the idea behind it is that the asteroid was moved into the position of the planet so that the asteroid could be mined, kind of like what people are in talks of doing at the moment with asteroids, of going out, getting them, bringing them back, and mining them in our atmosphere, which is a fascinating idea. Unless it goes wrong, and that they can't stop it, and next thing you know, we've just killed ourselves by propelling an asteroid at ourselves. But that's neither here nor there. It's still a fascinating idea, a fascinating premise, fascinating concept, and I guess in a universe as advanced as the Mass Effect universe, it's something that can be done quite easily. But yeah, Bringing Down the Skies DLC, it's a lot of fun. It's a bit short. Wish it was longer, but it was fun. One thing I want to mention before I get to my final sort of overall thoughts is that I wish they did more with the collectibles. So as you play through this game, you find collectibles, you find Prothean discs, you find League One medallions, you find markings and other sort of things you can sort of collect, or you can go to other planets and survey these planets and find resources and things like that. I wish they did more for them, because all you really get for a lot of them are XP and money, which is great, XP and money, especially how a lot of things in the store is really expensive. So you're going to need the money for high-end weapons and armor and things like that, and mods. But I just wish there was more to it. I just wish that once you found all the Prothean data discs, that you could meet somebody. Or there was a mention of, like, because you found X, Y, and Z amount of Prothean data discs, we have managed to unlock some more things that we didn't know about them, about their culture, or that Liara comes to you and goes, well, we've collected all of this. I found this new mod, this advanced mod, blah, 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 blah. Or I wish, maybe it is mentioned in ME2 and ME3, I don't really know. But I just wish there was more done with them, especially with the League One medallions and all the other sort of collectibles that you can find. If you was just to meet somebody, or you just get a bit of text being like, because you found X, Y, and Z, this person can now be laid to rest, or this group can now be learned more about because now we have more data on them, or whatever. Things like that, like, give me a reason to explore, give me a reason to do more of this, of like, oh, look, because I found all the Prothean discs, I now get a new gun, or I get a new armor mod, or I get more resources, or like a new mission for Mass Effect 2 or 3, or blah, blah, blah. Or even like, when I get to Mass Effect 3, I'm going to get a lot more war resources, because like these Prothean discs that I found helped us sort of decode a lot more of their writing or stuff like that. Possibly that's there, but it's been a while since I played Mass Effect 3, so I might be eating my words here. But I just wish in this game they did a lot more with them. I've just given you a lot more of, like, now you found them all, you get X, Y, and Z, or you get a bit of extra story information. But again, it's a side thing. It's not really that important. It's mostly there for money and XP, but I just wish they did more with it, for me personally. But yeah, my overall thoughts and feelings on the first Mass Effect game is that if you haven't played it, give it a go. And again, if you listen to this and you got this far, I'll probably ruin things for you anyway. But I still recommend it. It's absolutely fantastic. This, like the book, like Mass Effect Retribution, Revelation, sorry. It's still very fantastically done in such a way that you have a good sort of introduction to this world. It's in a very huge and expansive world, and it's one that I recommend to everybody. If I meet somebody and they said they haven't played Mass Effect, I always say to them, give it a go, play it. It's worth it. Get the DLC, play for the DLC. And now that the Legendary Edition's out and it's on Game Pass, I always say to people, look, it's on Game Pass. What have you got to lose? Give it a go. Give it a play. See what you think. What do you like it? Do you not like it? Meet the characters, fall in love, get angry, get upset, because you will get angry at certain characters and what they decide to do. You will get upset. You will fall in love with these characters, maybe more than just fall in love. You want to romance them. You have that option. You have the freedom of choice. You have the freedom of choosing if characters live or die. You have the freedom of basically saying how the universe is going to be, and how it's going to run by the end of Mass Effect 1. How your decisions in this game affect how the universe is going to be when you get to Mass Effect 2. And it's the same for Mass Effect 2. Your choices affect the end of Mass Effect 3, and if it's better or if it's worse. And this is why it took me so long to complete Mass Effect 1. Because even though I know my way around here and I can streamline it. I know the ins and outs of where to go, what to do, who to talk to, who's going to get me like the best sort of option for me in the long run for Mass Effect 3, but also what's the quickest way to get around this without missing loads of story things. It didn't take me as long as it would probably somebody who's never played Mass Effect before. But even so, it's one of those sort of games that you can get lost in for hours. And if I allowed myself to, I could easily just get lost in it. If it wasn't for this review, I probably would still be playing it now. I would have taken my time. But I still managed to go to every planet that I could to. I meant to go see everybody that I needed to. I managed to do all the side quests. I even got to meet the fan, Comrade Vernon, which, to be honest, again, he's not important to meet, but he's funny. If you do meet him, you meet him again in Mass Effect 2 and you meet him again in Mass Effect 3. And it's funny to meet him. And again, I won't spoil that story, but it's silly, but it's one of those where it's annoyance, but it's funny at the same time. But it's one of these things of like, Mass Effect is just ever expanded. It's ever huge. It's ever grander. And I love Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, 2 being my favourite. Mass Effect Andromeda, I adore that game as well. I like what it is. Again, it's not perfect. I won't sit here and say it's a perfect game. It's not. There are things that was wrong with it. There were things that could have been better, or the things that they did and they didn't have to do, or things like that. I'm just hopeful. And again, this probably will come up again when I talk about Mass Effect 2 and talk about Mass Effect 3, and more than likely when I talk about Mass Effect Andromeda. I just hope for whatever the future is for Mass Effect, because they are making another Mass Effect game, it just carries on this story. It carries on the legacy of Mass Effect. It still feels like Mass Effect. It still feels like the world and the sort of story that we've all come to love and know through this game, because this is the game that started it all. It's the one that started it all, and it's the one that kind of propelled it on to greatness, and it just got better and better. And even if you didn't like the ending of Mass Effect 3, you can't admit how good Mass Effect 2 and 3 were. And if it wasn't for this game being as good as this was, they wouldn't have existed. And who knows if me and all these other fans would still be talking about it today. Who's to say? But yeah, I absolutely adore Mass Effect 1. I really, really do. And I just recommend to anybody to play it. If you have played it, go back and play it again. If you haven't played it, hopefully I haven't spoiled it for you too much. But even so, there's so much to this universe that I'm only scratching the surface, really. There is so much to it, and there's so much to learn and so much to know that I just recommend, if you read books, read the book first, because that gives you a good introduction to a few of the characters and Saren and the world, and then play the game. But if you're not into books, just play the game. Play the first one, see what you think. And if you like it, have a go at Mass Effect 2, then 3. But yeah, so that is all she wrote, really. Thank you very, very much for listening to me today. One thing I want to say before I end, again, if you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments, what's your favourite Mass Effect? What is your favourite game in the series? Who's your favourite character? Do you like... what did you like about the first Mass Effect game? Did you like going around in the Mako? Do you have any funny stories of driving around in the Mako? You know, anything to do with the first Mass Effect or Mass Effect in general, let me know down in the comments down below. Also, subscribe if you haven't. If you like this content and you want to see more like it, subscribe. Let me know that you like it. Also, if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to leave a rating, 1 to 5 stars. Basically, how it works, if you're on your phone, go onto my page, click on About, and on About, there will be at the top the star rating. Click on that, and then you have the option to review the podcast from 1 to 5 stars. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on everything and anything that I am doing, really. So yeah, so I have been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to part 1 of my Mass Effect journey. The next one, which will be coming next month in July, I'm going to do it by a monthly basis. So this review comes out in June, at the end of June. And then Mass Effect 2 will come out at the end of July. And then Mass Effect 3 will be the end of August. Yeah, June, July, August. And then September will be Mass Effect Andromeda. So you've got a lot of Mass Effect stuff to look forward to, lots of Mass Effect goodness, which I'm very, very excited for. I'm still intimidated, to be honest, because I know how big Mass Effect 2 is, but it's going to be fun. So Until then, you've been listening to me, Luke the Human, for the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye all.